Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us for today's webinar on National Migration Week and the World Day of Migrants and Refugees. We've got an exciting panel for you all to enjoy and to learn from, and we really appreciate you joining us. I'm going to first, before we really jump into things, I obviously want to turn it over to Father Stark, who's going to say an opening prayer for us, and then we'll shift back over to me with some opening comments and introductions of the panelists, and then we'll move on to kind of a conversation and hopefully a Q&A if if people have questions. So Father Stark, please begin with a prayer, if you would.
Thank you, Todd. And let's just bow our heads, and I'm going to just use the prayer that Pope Francis sent for the World Day for Migrants and Refugees. So it's a very appropriate one. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Holy beloved Father, your Son Jesus taught us that there is a great rejoicing in heaven whenever someone lost is found, whenever someone excluded, rejected, or discarded is gathered into our we, which thus becomes ever wider. We ask you to grant the followers of Jesus and all people of goodwill the grace to do your will on earth. Bless each act of welcome and outreach that draws those in exile into the we of community and of the church, so that our earth may truly become what you yourself created it to be, the common home of all our sisters and brothers. Amen.
Thank you, Father Stark. We appreciate that. So one of the things I realized when we were when I was beginning to kind of prepare for this event and inviting people on to present is that this year is actually the 40th anniversary of the first National Migration Week. So it was back in 1979 that the bishops made a decision that they wanted to launch National Migration Week. And what they did is that they replaced the what was then called National Farm Workers Week, which really focused on migrant farm workers. So it was a much more narrowly tailored kind of focus that was used at that point in time. And the bishops decided that they wanted to kind of enlarge in the scope to really focus on the myriad of migrant populations that the church engages on a daily basis, in all sorts of ways, pastorally, in service, policy and advocacy wise, and so on and so forth. And so it was about 2 years after they made that decision in 1979 to launch, where it actually came to fruition, and it was the first one. The timing was originally the Monday after Epiphany. And one of the reasons why it was decided to start then was because obviously it was after Christmas, so they couldn't do it in December very well, right after the New Year's. But at the time, the Pope had traditionally issued his Migrants Day message around the first week of Advent. And so it was kind of, there was a close enough time frame for sort of National Migration Week to use the World Day of Migrants, and Refugees message from the Pope, but it wasn't, it didn't coincide directly. So they used that timing. That was one of the main reasons. Now, that has been for the past 39 years or so. That first second week of January is when National Migration Week has occurred. A couple of years back, the Pope sort of shifted the World Day of Migrants and Refugees day of celebration to the last Sunday in September. Now, this was really a great opportunity for the bishops to actually shift National Migration Week to really coincide with the WDMR, the Pope's the Pope's celebration. And so this is the first year when National Migration Week is actually taking place the week right before the World Day of Migrants and Refugees on the 26th. So we're celebrating it on September 20th to the 26th. And it's a really exciting opportunity, I think, for the Church in the United States to show solidarity with the Vatican, because National Migration Week now really climaxes with the World Day in a way that it didn't before, even though it was kind of roughly associated temporally with it. But it's really, there's a lot of overlap. And so that's just sort of a brief introduction to where we are in terms of National Migration Week. And I will give in some introductions to our great participants today. they'll be able to expand on various aspects of what they're doing. The first is Father Robert Stark, who was born in New Mexico. He was ordained a Catholic priest in 1977. He has worked as a parish priest and community organizer with immigrant communities in Chicago, as a missionary priest in Central America involved with internally displaced persons from violence, and as a director of Community Foundation, he worked with border colonies in New Mexico, and currently is director of the Office for Social Ministry in the Diocese of Honolulu, serving migrants in all the Hawaiian Islands. So in 2017, he joined the Vatican section on migrants and refugees, where he now serves as a regional coordinator for Canada, United States, Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean. So he's very busy. He's a member of the Congregation of the Blessed Sacrament. Our second panelist, Lady Ravella Kroll, is the Director of Hispanic Ministry for the Diocese of Kansas City, St. Joseph. She has been involved in ministry and taught faith formation for 12 years. In her work with the diocese, she spearheads all ministerial efforts with Hispanics on behalf of the bishop, including Pastoral Migratoria and some others related to the juveniles in the family, and leveraging the use of technology to communicate matters of faith. She has both developed and taught material focused on helping lay people with understanding discipleship, sharing their testimony, and having gospel conversations. And last but not least, Elena Segura is the Senior National Coordinator for Immigration at the Archdiocese of Chicago and leads a national pastoral migratoria, which she founded in 2008 as an immigrant-led ministry for service, justice, and accompaniment in parish communities. Pastoral migratoria is based in the See, Judge, Act methodology of Aparecida that was espoused by Pope Francis. A national pilot currently engages over 400 Hispanic lay leaders in 67 immigrant parishes across the Diocese of New York, Baltimore, Stockton, Kansas City, St. Joseph, and Chicago on civic and pastoral issues facing their own communities. So busy panel who are really engaged on these issues. I'm not going to talk any further. I want to turn it over to Father Stark, who will launch us off with this panel today. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. And thank you for the opportunity to participate in this USCCB webinar as part of the National Migration Week and World Day of Migrants and Refugees celebration. And I also want to thank all of you for your inspiring commitment and service with migrants and refugees, all here on the panel and those listening. I was asked to briefly say something this morning or this afternoon about the World Day for Migrants and Refugees and its theme this year, and then share some resources that our section, the section Migrant and Refugee section in the Vatican, has produced under the direction of Pope Francis for the World Day for Migrants and Refugees. But I'd like to begin by sharing some images of some migrants and refugees, because, let's see, in fact, yeah. So, whoops, that's not the right, hold on back. I knew if something happens wrong in technology, this would be it. Let me just make sure that what should have been here. Let's see there now. Now let's see if I can get back to you. Whoops. Are we back here? Let's see. Okay. Sorry. Do you see anything yet or no? There we go.
Not yet.
I can't see. Okay, maybe there. All right, let's see if this one works this time now. Okay. It should have come in here. Let's see if that's not the right. We did this just before the session. I don't know why it doesn't begin here. Let me just try one more time.
Screen. We can see your screen.
Yeah, but
it's just not on the World Day. The far left panel.
Yeah, let me just see if that's there. Now let's see if you can see my screen. If I go now. All right, this one should work this time. Okay, I apologize. So these are images that hopefully will help us focus on the very reason, the essence of why we have a World Day for Migrants and Refugees. Obviously, it's because we have sister and brother migrant or refugees around the world, but all too often, these migrants and refugees and their sufferings and hopes are hidden or invisible in the shadows or the so-called margins of society. So these images in particular are perhaps fresh because they're still in the news. For example, This young girl is from Haiti, and we are all aware of the catastrophic earthquake in Haiti, killing over 2,000 people this month and displacing 200,000 people, while Haiti is still suffering from a devastating earthquake 10 years ago, and many refugees from Haiti around the world as a result of that. Or this family photo reminds us of the current crisis in Afghanistan and the need to evacuate and resettle hundreds of thousands of Afghani migrants and refugees after 20 years of war there. And the other family photo here reminds us of the thousands of migrants and refugees who continue to arrive at the US border through Mexico, seeking asylum and fleeing violence, natural disasters, persistent poverty in their home countries. And the final photo is the solitary woman from Africa on the shore of the Mediterranean. And it reminds us that this last week, tragically, in Europe, it was announced that more than 1,200 refugees already, brothers and sisters from Africa, have already drowned this year in trying to cross the Mediterranean Sea. So Pope Francis's message of the World Day for Migrants and Refugees here. Let's see if we can go up to the top here. I think that's the problem. Yeah. The World Day for Migrants and Refugees. There we go. His message for the World Day of Migrants and Refugees is to pray to respond to these increasing needs of the millions of migrants and refugees throughout the world, including the need for vaccinations for millions of vulnerable people on the move throughout the planet. As was mentioned, as Todd mentioned, the Church has been celebrating the World Day of Migrants and Refugees for many years, actually since 1914. And it's always been an occasion to express the concern for different vulnerable people on the move and to pray for them in the face of many challenges and to actually increase awareness about the opportunities that migration offers. Every year, the World Day of Migrants and Refugees, more recently, is on that last day in September, and this year it'll be September 26th. Let me just get to this is our Migrants and Refugees section website, which I'm going to use. So the theme this year is, as we've already mentioned in the opening prayer, Pope Francis chose the theme towards an ever wider we. And the theme comes from the recent encyclical Fratelli Tutti, where the Pope calls for an ever more inclusive world by calling all to journey together towards an ever wider we, as wide as humanity, for the sake of renewing the human family, for building together a future of justice and peace during this pandemic period, and ensuring that no one is left behind. The section on migrants and refugees in the Vatican has produced, under the direction of Pope Francis, a series of materials that we do every year. And this year we're doing them in 9 languages. And I just want to take a few moments to introduce some of these materials to you. Every year the materials basically have subtopics on the theme. So the subtopics this year, as you can see, are such things such as learning life together. And each subtopic, we provide a scriptural quote, and it's chosen often from a different part of the world, and then a quote from Pope Francis, and this one has, obviously all the quotes this year will be from Fratelli Tutti. And then we have a good practice that's gathered from different places around the world that we've been blessed to be able to experience and share with them, and also a prayer often composed in a different part of the world. And then a video with Pope Francis and migrants and refugees and the people who accompany or serve with migrants and refugees around the world. For example, this one in orange up there, that's actually a video on South Africa, and this is one from Kosovo, and the ones down here are from, this is from Montreal. This is a video of our brothers and sisters up there. And then the final one is a video down here from, it actually began our sub-themes this year in the United States. And I actually want to show the video quickly from this video, because it'll give you a sense and a feel for the materials and what we tried to do. All the materials, as I said, have they're composed and produced in the areas in which they cover. So here I just go to this, and hopefully this is going to work. Hopefully we're going to be able to see it.
Quest'anno ho scelto come tema per la giornata mondiale del migrante e rifugiato un noi sempre più grande. È un invito rivolto a tutti, perché ci impegniamo a restaurare la nostra famiglia umana. Siamo come tanti granelli di sabbia, tutti diversi e unici, ma che insieme possono formare una spiaggia bellissima, una vera opera d'arte.
I'm Bishop Mark Seitz, and I'm the Bishop of El Paso on the U.S.-Mexico border. I grew up in a family of 10 children. We didn't have much, but I remember that whenever an extra mouth showed up at dinner time, we would just slide over, and my mother always made sure there was enough food for everyone.
Siamo tutti sulla stessa barca e siamo chiamati ad impegnarci affinché non ci siano più muri che ci separano, affinché non ci siano più gli altri, ma solo un noi grande come l'intera umanità.
God always gives us what we need to welcome another person. It's not about us and them. I found the most rewarding opportunities of my life serving here at the border. I've learned that borders can be vibrant places of encounter and welcome, encounters that enrich us. I've learned that we are all interconnected as one human family. We stand or fall together. We build walls and fences which divide us. Today, people of faith need to be bridge builders. The Holy Spirit breaks down everything that separates us, walls of poverty, indifference, and exclusion. Here at the border, and in every place of encounter with those on the margins, God is calling us to be a bridge people. God is weaving a beautiful new future at a time when many were being deported across the border on one occasion. I felt called to cross the border to meet with families being expelled on the other side. I met an immigrant family fleeing assassination threats and death, and then I accompanied them back to the international border to stand and witness while they sought asylum again. And when we got to the border and approached the guards, the 9-year-old young child in the family, Maria, took my hand. She was so vulnerable. I was fearful too. I discovered something about myself. I realized our destinies, hers and mine, were somehow linked. It was no longer about us and them. I felt the presence of God calling us to build a world where everyone has a place, a chance to flourish, to live with dignity. God calling us to build a world with a we as wide as humanity.
So all the videos this year have that motif of creating a picture out of the different diverse grains of sand. We also have a whole series of materials that are designed more for social media on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram and on YouTube. And these materials are much more oriented towards the youth, and are also in all the 9 languages that I said this year, so that we can reach multicultural and multi-diverse populations. But I think this is a good segue to my fellow colleagues on the panel, because we're really hoping that this year to engage many more of the youth, and also the multicultural dimension of a wider we, indeed a world that brings together all of our brothers and sisters in building a better future, especially during this time of the pandemic. So I'm going to drop out of this, hopefully, and get back to the thing. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Father Stark. Really appreciate it. I'm going to now turn it over to Layden, and she'll be able to speak on some issues of concern to her diocese and her own experience.
So thank you, Todd, for the opportunity to address this audience. It's wonderful to be here with these 2 amazing speakers, Father Stark and Elena Segura, whose work I absolutely admire. So as we've been discussing the theme of this year's World Day of Migrants and Refugees towards an ever wider we, which obviously comes from the Pope's encyclical Fratelli Tutti, well, as I sat and I prayed with this amazing document, it's hard to miss all the important topics the Holy Father discusses. But my attention was caught by the Pope's call to a greater charity in all aspects of our lives, including politics. And while I'm reading this at the same time, I, like many other working in ministry, am really concerned about our youth and young adults. So this past year, I executed a formation series for our young adult leaders. And one of the topics which kept coming up time after time was this issue of identity. Now, the question of identity is arguably one of the most difficult aspects to reconcile as immigrants. And whether we are newly arrived or well integrated, it is, in point of fact, probably something we share as American culture, the question of who are we? And this question is further highlighted by this year's theme. What is the we are moving towards? So that is a very big question. So I'm only going to focus on what I propose that could mean for this Catholic audience, and that's this. That in his encyclical Fratelli Tutti, the Pope shares his concerns about globalization and progress without a shared roadmap, right? So he says, in today's world, the sense of belonging to a single human family is fading, and the dream of working together for justice and peace seems an outdated utopia. So it's an outdated utopia. And what does this mean for our young adults? To me, it means that we have not effectively communicated our Catholic identity, not as another one of a plethora of potential identities which one can try on, like being vegan or part of one political party or another, but an understanding of a deeper identity as a son or daughter of God. And then the question popped into my mind, well, do we understand this identity ourselves? Have we taken for granted that as Catholics, as adults, parenting the next generation of believers, do we ourselves understand what these deeper meanings are? So as immigrants or children of immigrants, we experience separation from our place of origin and often a cultural and religious uprooting. What could be taken for granted in our countries of origin, a shared faith, shared values, are met with some really hard compromises in our adopted home. So then what is our identity? Is it Mexican? Is it Honduran? Is it Hispanic? Is it Latino? Is it American? Or is it Catholic? So our faith teaches that we are the adopted sons and daughters of God. So our deepest identity is rooted in the fact of a Father who loves us, a Son who saves us, and a Holy Spirit which empowers us. John 15:16 says that we did not choose him, but we were chosen and commissioned to bear fruit in the world. But what does that mean? It means that as believers, we already have an identity which cannot be taken away, an identity out of which we must live and act every day. So our current climate, post-Christian, secular, fragmented, well, it scrambles to claim an increasingly complex set of identities. Young adults try on new versions of themselves, and as they do so, they also decide either on the reproduction or repudiation of their inherited identities. It is impossible for them to remain neutral. For young Catholics, this means their identity development is competing with the cacophony of gender ideologies, of sexual identity politics, and other secular narratives. Ladies and gentlemen, the prophet Elijah reminds us that the Lord is not in the strong wind of ideologies, and he is not in the earthquake of new political movements. He, however, he's not in the dissonance of those narratives. It's followed, however, by a small, still voice of God. And so what I say is that unless that young ear is trained to know and understand his or her deepest identity, they will fail to respond. They will fail only to respond to the strong wind. They will fail only to feel the strong earthquake. And the Pope offers this advice to our youth. If someone tells young people to ignore their history, to reject the experiences of their elders, to look down on the past and look forward to a future that he himself holds out, doesn't it then become easy to draw them along so that they only do what he tells them? He needs the young to be shallow, to be uprooted, to be distrustful, so that they can trust only in his promises and act according to his plans. That is how various ideologies operate. They destroy or deconstruct all differences so that they can reign unopposed. To do so, however, they need young people to have no use for history. They need young people who spurn spiritual and human riches that are inherited from past generations and who are ignorant of everything that came before them. In other words, they need young people stripped of their identity and most especially that which is anchored to God alone. May I suggest that Fratelli Tutti points to the likelihood that cultural and human development are linked to politics in a way that we're only beginning to recognize. It points to the dangers of inserting political ideologies in those God-shaped spaces of our own identities. But if Fratelli Tutti points out the problems, it also points out potential solutions. And one is political charity. The Pope says that political charity is born out of a social awareness which transcends every individualistic mindset and makes us love the common good. It is, in Jesus's own words, the synthesis of the entire law. So for 2,000 years, the church has had to operate worldwide and adjust itself to effectively operate in local and world region contexts that can often challenge and threaten and subvert its central doctrines. We have operated under every kind of political system, democracies, kingdoms, oligarchies, dictatorships, even communism, and we have survived with our identity intact. We are sons and daughters of God, the creator of the universe. We are bound for citizenship in heaven. But what does that mean as citizens here on earth? Well, our very understanding of citizenship as it applies to the human person bound for heaven implies a radical approach to the politics of identity to first and foremost embrace our identity as Catholics. Once again, I turn to Pope Francis, who says in Fratelli Tutti, every commitment inspired by the church's social doctrine is derived from charity. This means acknowledging that love, overflowing with small gestures of mutual care, is also civic and political, and it makes itself felt in every action that seeks to build a better world. For this reason, charity finds expression not only in close, intimate relationships, but also in macro relationships, in the social, economic, and political relationships. This is what we most urgently need to communicate to our young adults. And we, as the keepers of what must be handed down, if we are to work with them towards an ever wider we, this means our inclusion in the public sphere, but it does not mean our surrender of our Catholic identity. The pivotal role in creating a culture of fraternity, of solidarity and graciousness, the renewed appreciation of politics as a lofty vocation, and here I'm again quoting Fratelli Tutti, and one of the highest forms of charity will be played by young people, inasmuch as they are taught to respect history, to respect the elderly, to respect creation, and to respect a commitment to social dialogue between generations, and ultimately solidarity. In other words, inasmuch as they are acting out of their deepest identity as Catholics, as sons and daughters of God. So thank you kindly for your time. That has been how I've spent mine in trying to inculcate this beautiful teaching of our Pope into our young adults. And, as a result of that, we are planning all these beautiful activities for National Migration Week, which I think will, again, emphasize for them that when we act truly out of our deepest identity, we necessarily are kinder, are gentler, are open to our brothers and sisters, and there are no borders in our hearts. And that's something that we're trying to express in the things that we do. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much, Layden. That was fantastic. I really appreciate the reflections on identity and the Catholic faith. I'm sure people will have questions. I do want to invite people as we move forward. If you have questions, you should be able to type them in the Q&A box. So please do. I think there's going to be a lot of grist to go over after these presentations are over. And certainly not last but not least, Elena Segura. We're going to turn over to her, and she can provide some reflection on the Pastoral Migratoria and some other things that are going on in her diocese and her experiences.
Thank you so much, Tad. What a privilege for me to share with you. I'm going to respond to this question. What could we do for Migration Week? So that's the main thing. So I want to start with a Catholic campaign for immigration reform. As many of you probably are familiar, the new name has been for a while. Of course, it's Justice for Immigrants. But this campaign started in 2005. I'm going to share with you what we've done. We continue doing with that Justice for Immigrants or Catholic campaign for immigration reform. It has three main goals. One is to educate the Catholic community on the benefits of immigrants and immigration. Second, to advocate for immigration reform. And third, to be involved, to accompany people if the legislation will pass. We're going to be working with them until become, eventually citizens. So, and with those goals that started in 2005, here in Chicago, we took very seriously the aspect of education. Education is very important. If there's no conversion, there's no solidarity. The solidarity is the expression of something that happened within us. And that was very, very important. So here in Chicago, we were very blessed to be able to develop different kind of networks. One of them has been the Priests for Justice for Immigrants in 2005. To this date, we have around 200 priests who are very involved in the education aspect of this Justice for Immigrants campaign, and as well in the advocacy aspect. And they've been doing a lot of things. I'll share with you some of the things, but my point is, since 2005, we've been involved in the educational aspect of it. The other one is the Sisters and Brothers of Immigrants. This is a network of religious sisters, around 57 religious sisters since 2007, actively, and you're gonna see one of the activities for Migration Week at the end of the presentation. The other one, it came out in 2010. This is the Immigration Parish Coordinators. We have 127, we have more than 300 parishes in Chicago, but 127 has somebody who really works in the educational and the advocacy aspect of this Justice for Immigrants or the Catholic Campaign for Immigration Reform. So that has been very, very important. And I'm going to share with you some of the let me see how could I follow to the next. I'm trying to look for the next. Let me see. Just trying to move to the next slide. Doesn't work here. Okay, I got it. Thank you. So, number two. I'm sorry for this. Let me see this one. This is the one. So for it was fascinating when Todd just mentioned that it was also Father Stark is the one who said in 1914 the world focus on migrant from the Vatican has started, but in the U.S. since 1976, it is true, and I have to confess, it was in around 2000. We've been very involved since 2005, of course, but it was in 2009 somebody came to me and said, Elena, did you know that there is a migration week? And I've been working for immigration, as I said, for Justice for Immigrants since 2005, and I didn't pay attention. I confess I didn't pay attention. Who has time during Epiphany? Everybody is so busy. You started with, with Our Lady of Guadalupe celebrations, the Posada, the Christmas, and everybody. So that was my excuse. But when this person said, did you know that I was working in Indonesia and the Philippines? They dedicate a whole month to create awareness of immigration and refugees. It really was a call to me. I heard him presenting this challenge, and I with discerning, and I had to stop and I said, we need to do something for this migration week. So this is 2010. So since 2010, we've been working. Father Stark, if you put just mute, that might help us sometimes. And so it was since 2010 we worked with the Priests for Justice for Immigrants. One of the things that they did, they developed homily helps. They put together prayers and advocacy issues, resources, and we sent to all 365 parishes. And also we asked the Cardinal to write a letter, and the letter from the Cardinal went to every single priest, and the Priests for Justice did follow up with their brother priests. So we really, since 2010, we focus on education, and we're always looking for action alerts that the Justice for Immigrants has been doing, or anything that could create not just awareness, but also an opportunity for parishioners to act. And that was a wonderful way to start Migration Week. That was our first thing. Later, 3 years later, is when we started this tradition. We've been doing this for at least almost 8-9 years at the cathedral. We have this mass during Epiphany. It was Epiphany Sunday, and with multicultural, we had 45 countries represented, each country a couple, and with their costumes, and they participated at the procession at the beginning, during the offering. It was just an amazing experience. We have more than 1,000 people and we started with Cardinal George, we continue with Cardinal Supich, and each of the cardinals told me personally this was their favorite celebration in the whole year, in every places that they have been, because it has been beautiful. Not just the costumes, but also just the presence and diversity. It was like an offering to God of this multicultural presence of people in our community. So we've been doing since 2013, from every single year until the of course the pandemic. So it was a wonderful way. We had a planning team, a cultural planning team, that they are the ones who organize and develop different things, promotional things. We had the media. Of course, we have radio, TV, the newspapers. We had all kinds of things. So it was a very wonderful thing that happened in terms of creating awareness. And I realized a lot of people in their own parish, they didn't realize how diverse our community is. So we received positive responses and reactions to that. So at the same time, also we had individual parishes have been doing their own celebrations, where there's a mass, especially for immigrants, or rosaries for immigrants, and potlucks. So there were we call this, I don't know if you in your diocese we have here our twin parish program. So there are 2 parishes already connected, and some of them there were an American parish or another parish were multicultural or Hispanic. So they connected and they did some things together. So we encourage that relationship in this kind of connection within parishes. And the immigration parish coordinators, this is a beautiful network in the English-speaking community, and they organize this film festival. They did for 3 or 4 years already, even during the pandemic, they did online. It was wonderful. It's becoming more and more known. But again, it's to give an opportunity for people to learn more the realities of immigrants and refugees through this film. So the film worked like having one weekend in this parish, the other weekend in the goes another movie in different parishes, and there are people who do discussions and they have fellowship time. So it was a wonderful way to be connected with people who want to learn more about the immigrant community. That is still in process. They're planning to do this time. They want to do still in January this time, but they are doing something for September, of course. So we're working that. And we also did workshops. So speakers, invited parishes, invited speakers, and we had a beautiful experience with this Sheriff Curran, who used to be an anti-immigrant, a sheriff who really hired new police and start giving tickets to basically racial profiling, especially to undocumented immigrants, and Pastoral Migratoria, which is an immigrant social ministry for service, justice, and accompaniment. We've been praying for him. It took us 9 years praying for him on a weekly basis, and he had a conversion experience. So he is the one who really was a spokesperson in different places during Migration Week in parishes, where he shared his experience, how he was transformed. And we had a lot of other people who really were converted because of his beautiful conversion experience. And he's the one who helped to pass the driver license in Illinois for undocumented people. That's the impact that the conversion could make from an anti-immigrant sheriff, Catholic, and then this conversion experience, and passing to this other to pass a legislation. So he had a very, very important role in the process. And again, there are events in parishes, and this Pastoral Migratoria, we, as I mentioned, we started here in Chicago. Then in 2016, we began sharing with other dioceses in the country. We are in Kansas City, Missouri, where Leighton is, and we are in Stockton, California, Baltimore, New York, soon in Washington, D.C. There is interest in other dioceses too. So since we've been continue working for justice for immigrants, or the Catholic Campaign for Immigration Reform, educate to our sisters and brothers who are native born here, English-speaking people, very important, is a priority for us too. So we share what we've been doing in Chicago for Migration Week, and we encourage these dioceses to get engaged. And we realized that they were themselves also had the same attitude I had. Oh, who has the time to do this during Epiphany? And now they don't have any more excuses. It's not Epiphany. Now we move to September. So there's a lot of things that could be done. So even during Epiphany, last year alone in 2020, just before the pandemic, there were 53 events in these 5 dioceses, with 32 parishes very engaged and doing a special masses and pilgrimages. The Diocese of New York did a beautiful pilgrimage, a prayer vigil in different places, and you can see that. And just to finish, because I don't want to pass my time, these are the latest, what's being planned for this September. The IPCs, the Immigration Parish Coordinators, are organizing a prayer vigil, Voices of Immigrants, focusing in Afghanistan refugees. That's a newest thing that people are really, so have a testimony of somebody who's going to be talking, do a prayer and also action. So we're really doing, it's not just prayer, it's also action alert. It's something that they can participate in legislative issues that is very, very important. That's in Chicago. The other one, Washington, D.C., they are organizing in D.C. at the cathedral. What's the name of the cathedral? The Cathedral of San Matthew in Washington, D.C., organizing this event also. And we have, remember, the Sisters and Brothers of Immigrants, the 57 religious orders. Those sisters are awesome. They do a lot of work, prophetic work. So they're organizing a conference and imagining a world of inclusion, precisely connected with the wider we, the theme of this year for migration. They have key people who are going to be participating and also be doing a follow-up on that. And we have Pastoral Migratoria in the Polish community. It's called Polish Immigrant to Immigrant Ministry. And they are also participating this year on September 20. They have this mass for immigrants. And the celebrant is a Kenyan priest who speaks Polish. And who, there's a lot of cultural diversity in Polish, also in Polonia, that is going to be expressed in this beautiful, I call the mini cathedral of Holy Name Cathedral here. Similarly, the same concept, but this time in the Polish community, and we're very grateful. And we have a lot of parishes organizing holy hours and festivals and padlocks and culture and diversity in as part of creating awareness of participating in this year's Migration Week. So I'll stop there and I'll get back to you, Todd.
Thank you so much. I'm convinced that every time I hear Elena speak about Pastoral Migratoria and everything they're doing, I grow increasingly convinced that her superpower is infinite energy, because I don't know how she does all that she does with 24 hours in a day. We're gonna turn to questions now. I'm taking the liberty of asking the first question, and I sent a question out to them earlier as sort of prep, but now that I've been listening to what they were saying, I'm kind of going to throw them a curveball and kind of base a question on what they were talking about. So I'll ask all three first, and then you guys can take it in whatever order you want. So I guess first, Father Stark, given your connection to the Pope and the Vatican leadership, and sort of their work on migration, I'm curious if you could comment a little bit on what the Pope sees or Vatican leadership sees as some of the real challenges achieving this goal of an ever wider we. What is it that, is there one thing or theme that the Pope, that you can draw our attention to, which might allow us to start focusing in on that problem area that might be inhibiting our achieving a wider we? For Layden, I think I heard you use the term cacophony at least one or two times during your talk. And that really brings into the question an issue of communication. What is, when you're talking about, trying to establish identity and get the Catholic message through to kind of young Catholics, from different walks of life, are there any particularly effective ways, social media, interactive websites, speeches, radio, yada, 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 that you have found are particularly effective in actually delivering this message to people? And then to Elena, your work is very hands-on. You seem to, you're very involved with events and things going on. This past year, obviously with COVID, things have shut down for a while. So I'm curious as to how COVID affected your ministry and outreach to immigrants in particular. And if there were any good things that came of it, in terms of, wow, we can use social media or Zoom so much more effective than we ever thought we could, whatever it is. Is there any lessons learned that we could sort of take and to use for our own advantage as we try to kind of reach out to diverse groups of people? I don't know who wants to go first. Any volunteers?
I'll go first. Mine's super easy.
Thank you.
So I think you read earlier in my little bio blurb that, I try to leverage technology to communicate the faith. And I have found a piece of technology that is seriously the most effective way to reach young adults, reach people, anybody in general, but especially young adults. And that is my epic TikTok dances. No, I'm kidding. It is not. It is entering into the messiness of their lives. So the young adults that I have dealt with, the young adults that I walk with in person. So our formation was in person, and then I walk with them in their lives. I don't, use Zoom. I don't use any other technology other than I try to connect with them, because they have a lot of technology and the kinds of ways to reach them, the social media, that changes all the time. And there will become a time where I'm not as cool as I think I am. So I can't rely on that to reach them. I rely on building relationships and putting my faith to work in the messiness of their lives. And it's very similar to the way that we run Pastoral Migratoria in my diocese. You're entering into the messiness of people's lives, and you're entering with your faith. So what I do with the young adults that has been effective at this point, at least, is building those relationships. And it's simply discipleship. It's in the Bible. It's all over Acts. It's every place you read in the New Testament. It's walking with the human person and allowing their mess to change you a little bit, allowing their mess to give you that, put a face to God, and loving them through that mess, even if it's not where you want them to be. So that has been, for me, the most effective way to really accompany them, because once they trust you, they're ready to hear you. And if it means that you have to have some hard conversations, perhaps about the way they're living their lives, perhaps approaching them about a misunderstanding they have about faith. And, again, they're competing with all these ideologies who are far more entertaining, far more appealing, and speak to their ability to, quote unquote, control the things in their lives, right? You can control your identity, you control your sexual identity, you can control, you can be the God of your own universe. That's what we're competing against, really. That's what we're competing against, is competing them making their own worlds in which they are themselves God. And through these relationships I build with them, and that's it. It's just building those relationships, and it's not easy. It's a process. It's not fast, but it worked for Jesus. He started with those knuckleheads back, in the fishing company, and then it built from there. Now, I'm not suggesting that like in 2,000 years, gonna have but in 2000, hopefully, come Lord Jesus, sooner than 2,000 years, they'll have had someone in their life who speaks truth into their life, someone in their life who loves them where they are right now, and someone in their life who doesn't want them to stay there, but more specifically, someone in their life who tries to mirror Jesus for them and tries to see Jesus in them. So that's it. That's my big secret.
It's good to know your secret. We should all take advantage of it, I think, and use it to our own benefit. I don't know, Father Stark or Elena, I don't know if either of you have thoughts on that question, on the question that I've asked.
Just very quickly, in terms of your question related to, what we learn in COVID. We started using, we have Pastoral Migratoria has the Red Nacional Pastoral Migratoria, which is a network of dioceses with or without Pastoral Migratoria to develop some sharing best practices, more information, things like that. So we've been using Zoom 2 years before the pandemic. And I didn't know that God has been preparing us for the pandemic, because when we got to the pandemic, we knew what it was. We've been working. So what we've done, we developed a train the trainer seminars, and we're still doing train the trainer in the immigrant community how to use their phone as a way to really do digital ministry. So that's a challenge for us, but also a great opportunity to continue working on that. So that has been and also I think how to do accompaniment using social media, how to use technology. And these groups, we have a lot of WhatsApp groups all over WhatsApp groups, and we continue sharing our faith and the resources, but in a different way. And we just had last weekend a retreat, a hybrid retreat, our 12th retreat of Pastoral Migratoria here in Chicago, and we had other retreats also just Kansas City, and I think it's Stockton also, they're organizing things like that. So we're using this hybrid. There are some things you can do in person, but a lot of things could be done also online. So we're working on that. That's one lesson that we learned, and we're very grateful for this new way of doing a company and continue working in service and justice and accompaniment.
Thank you, Elena. I appreciate it. Father Stark, do you have any thoughts on the question?
Well, I think that it was pretty clear that for us in our section that the message from Pope Francis to us has constantly been listen, listen, listen. That the most difficult obstacle in creating an Iglesia sin fronteras and overcoming borders is to be able to begin by really listening. And so, and it's not something I find personally that easy to do. So I find that, and he continually calls upon us to do that by saying that, in fact, it's by listening that we'll be able to see. It's one of the lessons I learned when I was as a missionary in Central America. A very wise woman came out to me and she said, one of the ways that we'll be able to do good work together is we'll be able to, those that can see the invisible can do the impossible, but in order to see, you have to be able to listen. And so I think that that's, I think, a major challenge for us in the church, and particularly for clergy in the church. I think to literally be able to realize that we have so much to learn and to listen in the process. And the image of the Emmaus, I think the other is that in listening, then sharing the journey, to be able to really accompany and to share some of those risks. And I find it often the Pope has used the Emmaus account as a really good model, that in fact it's the ability of Jesus to accompany by listening first, and then being able to literally clarify and help others see. And it's ironic that I think during the youth, the Synod on the Youth, people were lifting up the possibility of the Emmaus account as being sort of an iconic image, and that it were youth that were walking on the road and that were having difficulty, and that the church needed to come along and accompany them along the way. And the Pope and others flipped it on its head and said that no, it's basically maybe it's the church that's struggling along the way, and it's the youth that come along, and in their listening and in their active engagement with us, that we will be able to see in the breaking of the bread together that real risen Lord in our midst. And I think that's something that Pope Francis has continually challenged us to do. In order for us to really create an Iglesia sin fronteras, without borders, we have to be able to do a lot of listening in order to be able to see our brothers and sisters not as others, but as we.
Great. Thank you so much, Father Stark, and thank you to Elena and Leighton. If there are any questions, I know we're getting to the top of the hour, and so we've actually filled the time pretty well, I think, with a lot of interesting stuff to chew on as we move forward. If you have questions, we have another minute or two, please, type them in real quick. I'm sure that we can do some follow-up, after this webinar. If any of you, think of some things, I put my email in the chat box, and you can reach out to me anytime you want. I really would like to get to know all of you a little bit more. And so, please do. One thing I will say, one of the things we're trying to do this year for National Migration Week, if you have events that you want us to highlight, please be sure to send us information, the who, what, when, where. If you have a website, a contact person, send it out to us, and we can, help to highlight it. We're thinking of trying to do an online map. We also have newsletters that go out every 2 weeks. It's sort of a biweekly newsletter. We can include stuff in there. And it's I think one of the challenges, is we need to amplify each other as well, is just sort of just help each other get heard as well, because there are lots of things going on, and it seems like it's a theme today, is just the listening and helping other people listen and listening ourselves. So I don't know. I don't see any questions. So I want to thank the panelists for their time and for coming to speak. It was all really interesting, very different perspectives that you all provided, which I think is super important. And I look forward to working with y'all moving forward, as well as everyone who's on the listening in. Be sure to go to justiceforimmigrants.org for more information as we approach National Migration Week. Lots of good resources there. And, again, feel free to drop me an email at any time. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.